this meeting once again. It's always a very great pleasure to see you guys. This is one of my most, sorry, somebody saying something? Yeah, so without wasting more time, we know we have, today's meeting is going to be a special one. We're not going to go by the regular agenda because we have guests who are coming in to give us insights into very topical topic, and we're going to provide them ample time to do justice to the discussion. So as usual, we take off, we start our meetings by observing a 30-second silent invocation. We are religiously neutral and we don't want to impose any form of religion on anybody. So whatever you believe in, just quietly, silently do an invocation. We do that for 30 seconds, then we go straight into the meeting. So just 30 seconds. Yeah, thank you very much. You know, we are, where we come from Africa and all over the world, Africans and Africans in diaspora are generally spiritual people. We like to, you know, seek divine guidance. So that's why we observe that. So without much ado, I would want to introduce our main event for today. We're going to have a discussion on a very topical issue. I know you've all been excited about this. Everybody's been looking forward to this event. So I would at this point go straight into the discussion, and we'll be handing over to Mr. Tai Lambo, who would help us introduce the topic and also the discussants. Over to you, Mr. Lambo.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Oriade. I am extremely excited to be on this panel. I can hear some echo. I don't know if it's somebody may, okay. All right, I think I know what it is. So very excited to be moderating this panel of, I really consider top-notch professionals that I have the highest regard for. So obviously I gleaned this mission statement from the NIGUSIT, I believe Facebook or Twitter page, social media page. The purpose of NIGUSIT is to bring together the world's brightest industry transformers and leaders to help people like you to succeed. So some of you have had the blessing of knowing personally and interacting with you over the past year. And it's almost, I think, just a little bit over a year since I was invited to speak to you. And I think a lot has happened in the past 1 year. We've seen, I think, at least 2 unicorns in Nigeria, out of the tech space. So I think we've seen a lot happen. One thing I've also seen is I've seen a lot more collaboration now and partnerships than I've seen in my 32 years in IT and 25 years in cybersecurity. So that's really the theme. The theme is to talk about Africa and African Diaspora Partnerships. And that partnership has to be very, very intentional. We have a shared history as Black people all over the world. We also have a shared destiny, in my opinion. I think the more we can work together and the more we can kind of join forces, we're always going to have differences. We're always going to have things that potentially could divide us. But I believe that the more united we are, we've seen that from some other races, like the Jews, the state of Israel. We've seen that, with some other races in Asia as well. So the more united we can be, irrespective of our backgrounds, of our nationality, our belief systems, the more we can accomplish more together. So that's really kind of what inspired me, to think about doing this panel or moderating this panel. So I was very, very intentional about just kind of setting the tone for the panel. We know what the issues are. We know the things that divide us, right? So I really don't want us focusing too much on the problems. I used to work for a really smart guy that said there are two ways you can approach a problem. And that's kind of how I think, but he put it really, really well. He said you can either admire the problem and you could get paralyzed with the problem, or you can actually roll up your sleeves and say, how can I be part of the solution? So I think the challenge I always challenge myself is, how can I, in a little way, become part of a solution once I already know what the problem is? So the old African proverb says, if you want to go quickly, you go alone. If you want to go far, you go together. And I'm sure this is a Nigerian, proverb. They say African proverb, but I really have to believe it's Nigeria because obviously I'm Nigerian. But we also have, one of the most inspirational leaders in history, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who basically said, life's most persistent and urgent question is, what are you doing for others? I wake up every single day thinking about that. I'm very, very mission driven, in terms of how I kind of live my life and how I, purposefully go about, everything I do is mission driven. So I think that's something we could all try to imbibe. And I think that's probably the key, or one of the keys anyway, to us being able to unite, and partner with each other. So that's a little bit about me and the mindset and everything that kind of shaped, this coming up with this idea of having a panel discussion. So first of all, everybody, happy Black History Month. We're here for this panel specifically for that. So I have the pleasure of introducing our esteemed panelists. But I don't think I can do justice. I put together, one slide to describe just at a very, very high level who they are. But I honestly don't think I can do justice, to even trying, to introduce them. So I'd highly encourage you to go out to their LinkedIn, as well as just generally do Google searches for them, and you're going to understand why they're on this panel. So I'm going to give each panelist a minute or two to kind of talk about their, just very high level, their story, how they've gotten involved in what I call this partnership between Africa and the African diaspora, what they've done in the past, maybe a little bit of history of how they first started doing, in that journey, right, towards this partnership, and maybe what they're currently doing and what they're planning to do in future to foster this partnership. So Dr. Norma Burgess, I've only known her for about a week or two, but I've known one of her most amazing products. And when I say products, I really can't find a better word to describe what I'm about to say. I've been blessed to mentor her daughter for almost 15 years. She's one of the top 10 CISOs or CISOs that I've had the benefit of working with, not only as a colleague in the industry, but also as a mentor. I actually started mentoring her about 15 years ago. And it was, so Sharon, full disclosure, I invited Sharon to the panel, and Sharon was like, well, it doesn't really work after checking her schedule, but I'd like to recommend, Norma Burgess. And I said, okay, are you related? And Sharon said, yeah, she's my mom, with a big smile. And then she sent me a link regarding Dr. Burgess. And I said, okay, now it all makes sense. Now I see where Sharon gets everything, right? Her passion, the drive, the smartness, everything. So I think that would be my introduction, which I know doesn't really do justice to Dr. Burgess, but I'm just going to ask the panelists to spend, 2 minutes just kind of introducing themselves, and then we'll dive right into the Q&A. The question and answers. Dr. Burgess, over to you.
Well, you know, I never tire of you hearing you talk about my daughter. I don't think any parent does. So anytime you want to talk about it, that's great. I am Norma Burgess, and I'm a sociologist by training. I have a high level of curiosity about lots of things, in particular international affairs and international travel. I have traveled very broadly and have visited the continent several times. My first out of the country experience was in Nigeria, in Enugu, and went there for a conference and had a wonderful time. And I think part of it was, again, the curiosity, because people would say, well, can't you do what you do here rather than go there? And why you want to go there? But I want to know things. I want to see what it's like. I want to see the landscape and all such things. And subsequently, and years later, I went to Ghana for 3 weeks. We have a counseling program that we gave the students an international experience to work with some children who had been rescued from Lake Volta and the fishing industry. And then I went to Ghana, not Ghana, but Kenya, and had some good experiences there. And Madagascar, who considers themselves part of Africa, but just the differences that you see across the board in our culture, in our being is so important. And it's important to learn about where my people come from and where we all come from. And I respect that and treasure that, because it's part of who we are. And I think until you understand that, or until people understand that, it's very difficult to explain why you go where you go. But I am in the area of diversity and inclusion at this moment. I've served in higher ed for the past 30 plus years as a professor, department chair, founding dean twice. So this is where I am now. So I am very encouraged to be invited to this panel, and am currently working on a partnership with the University of Rwanda through our university and their university. So I'm excited to learn more about their progress, learn more about Nigerian progress, and just excited to be here. So thank you very much for the invitation.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Burgess. Mr. Festus.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Festus Olayinka here, but I'm sure most people also know me by Lekon Olayinka. So listen, I've been honored and blessed to have been to many continents around the world. And I see everywhere I've been to, you know, for work, because we have subsidiary locations around those different countries around the world. I see Black people, and I see, you know, in one way or the other, I'm happy to see, you know, the Blacks out there doing the best that they can, but of course they can do better. So one of the things that kind of like shaped how I approach things, right, was what can I do? You know, everyone on this forum, everyone is successful in their own right, but I think we can do better. So in terms of how do we give back to the community, giving back to, you know, Black people in general, minorities, I put my neck in there, out there to make sure I give back. I serve in my neighborhood, in my community, you know, just making sure that, you know, Black people, minorities have that visibility. So I'm not afraid to stick my neck out there and do the right thing. In the different corporations I've worked for, and I've worked for many, many global companies, I'm always, one of the first things I do is when I get out there is I'm talking to minorities, mostly Black people. How can I assist? Because I'm fortunate to have that seat at the table, and how can I really help people out there? I've been honored and fortunate to have done various things in the bank I used to work for before moving to my current bank. Currently, I work for HSBC, but I used to work for a mid-sized bank of $27 billion. One of the things, I worked there for like 4.5 years or 5 years, and one of the things I noticed was they didn't have a Black History Month program. And there are a lot of Black people that work for the company. This is a company that has about 250 branches out there within the United States. Most people that work in the branch, in the back office, obviously are, you know, Black people, I don't want to say African Americans, I say Black people and minorities for the most part. And why would you not have Black History Month program? I brought that in. There was a little resistance, and we can talk about that later, but I was able to use my soft skills to navigate the trenches, talking to very, very senior people in the company. And 3-4 years later, the rest is history. And now they have its BAU. So I'm going to stop there, and I'll let somebody else talk. Thank you.
Awesome. So I would like to put a pin on that, why you got that resistance, when we get to the question and answer part. So hold that thought for a minute. Big brother Eric, that I'm actually older than, by the way, but I still call him Big brother Eric.
Thank you very much, Ty. I appreciate you. I appreciate you. Thank you for having me. You know, I'm Eric Permenter. I'm the founder and chairman with Links Technology Partners, but I also have the pleasure of working with Dr. Burgess's daughter over at Cyversity, where we founded an organization focused on bridging the gap between women and minorities in cybersecurity. We do that by providing, you know, 4 key programs purposely built to enable individuals' careers in cybersecurity, and it ranges from issuing basic scholarships so that individuals can get the education to enter the field, all the way to truly helping someone identify their career, creating that career path, and walking alongside of them as they take that journey. Along that note, I had an opportunity to work with a major bank to separate a large portion of their business away from the UK into South Africa. And that was my opportunity to be local on the ground and experience the culture and really take a lot of the energy in ways that I never imagined. And there was 2 things that kept sticking out for me. One, it was such a highly educated population, right? No matter where I went, the conversation that was being had was very elevated in multiple ways. The second was just how genuinely polite, right, individuals were in conducting themselves. And I put the 2 together and ultimately ended up creating a educational security operations center in partnership with our nonprofit, Cyversity, that financial services firm, which ultimately ended up being able to convert individuals that were working in the call center. And those are typically, right, the highly educated individuals that don't get opportunities to work anywhere else in the organization. And so we were able to get those individuals an opportunity to get trained up to speed and tested to operate in the Security Operations Center. And I was so proud to see that of the 3,000 plus that applied, we were able to get 125 into the program, and all of them made it through. And I think about 80% of them got converted into a cybersecurity role. So I'm feeding on that, working on some new programs that I'm sure we'll touch upon throughout the conversation. But I'm so honored to be here, and I appreciate the invitation again, Todd.
Eric, that is awesome. We need to talk offline about how you can replicate that in Nigeria. I have to warn you, we may not appear as polite as the South Africans, though.
I could never believe
my
that.
words very carefully. But we have a good heart. I can just tell you that.
Indeed.
All right, so let's get into the Q&A part. I just have the questions in my mind that I would like to ask you. Some of it you've kind of touched on, but you haven't. I'd like for you to maybe expand a little bit, if there's anything you didn't cover in kind of high level of your journey. So the first question is, can you describe your experience? You've already described that, But what are the challenges that you encountered? So I'm sure it can't all be rosy, right? Some of it, Ari, you and I have talked about offline, the different grades of, skin tone, for instance, in South Africa. So if you can maybe touch a little bit on that, but yeah. I'll do a round robin. So we'll start with Dr. Burgess. So hold that thought, Ari. And then next will be Festus, and then yourself, and then we'll just do that for each question. So what challenges have you experienced along the way in this partnership journey or experience, and what opportunities have you also uncovered? Dr. Burgess.
Okay, I think what I'd like to do is start with the first one, because that set the stage for the rest of my journey. A lot of times when you begin careers as a first, and I'm sure that each of you has had your first. I am the first African American to receive the PhD in sociology from North Carolina State University. And I did that in 1986. Now, university was founded in 1776. And I think you can imagine that somebody should have graduated before me, but they didn't. But it's a matter of all the things that I've been exposed to. There are always people who said, well, well, we don't know if you can do it or not, or maybe you shouldn't be here or whatever. So I made decisions early on about what I thought I should do. So I thought I should be there, and I thought I should finish, and I thought I should have a PhD, and I got it. So, once I did that, just thinking about what else I was supposed to do. So I had mentors along the way who said, the best place you can be is in a Research 1 institution in a PhD granting department, and that's what you do. Well, I did that and achieved full professorship many years ago, but nobody told me what else I was supposed to do. So when I got there, it's like, okay, so what's next? Then that's when I began to think about what I really wanted to do and where I wanted to be. And I just kept going with it. So it takes a lot to deter me. And I wanted to set that because they are examples that people watch. So as a result, I have a lot of mentees or people who are discouraged. There were people who encouraged me when I was discouraged. So I feel the need to pass it forward or pay it forward and move forward with that. Because a lot of times people, when people tell you you can't, people get discouraged and quit. And I know that it's possible to do. And I give my examples to people. I had small children, and what is your point? Well, and I think it's important to talk to people when they are struggling, because they don't know that they can keep going and it'll still get better. So that's the one point that I would offer, is to keep going all the time and find somebody that will help you, because there are people there. Sometimes we're too independent to ask for assistance, but it doesn't bother me a bit at this stage in my life. So I'll ask for what I need, and I don't hesitate.
Wow, very well said. So I think when we had our initial discussion, you touched on something, your trip to Nigeria, which is your first trip to Africa.
Yeah.
And folks were asking you questions that you found interesting. Would you like to maybe expand on that?
I can. One of the things that people wanted to know was, well, what was it like? Well, what did you see? Did they have huts, or did they have food? Did they have various things that you don't know unless you know and you go? So I wanted to go and find out, and we had an excellent time. There was a group of us who went for a conference, met a lot of new people. And I think one of the things that I appreciated so much about that trip is that it taught me how to not have expectations, so much so that you could enjoy the trip. So we got there, and I told my mother I would call her when I got there. Well, I didn't know that AT&T didn't work on the phone and you had to go to NITEL. I didn't know what NITEL was. I didn't know where it was, but I learned all those things on that trip. So now when I'm delayed anywhere, it's like, okay, well, one day I'll get there, and I'll get there soon. But it doesn't really shake my foundation when things don't go like they should. That's the way they're going. That's the way they should go, not what I expect them to do. So I can roll with whatever I get. But it was a great trip. Met lots of people, saw lots of things, and it was just a life-changing experience, because it taught me how to travel internationally and what to expect and what not to expect. And I have always appreciated it. And one day I'll get back there and see how it has improved and what it looks like today. Because when I went, it was under military government. And I know a lot of things have changed since that time.
Yeah, during offline conversation. You went literally a year after, I think it was a year after you went that Abacha came into power.
Yeah.
And Nigeria has been on a roller coaster ride since then. Now, the average person has at least one cell phone, sometimes two.
Okay.
I'm probably generalizing. That's probably not
Yeah.
the official stats, but it's changed a lot since then.
Yeah.
But some of those things have also become more challenging as well because of other factors.
Yeah.
But thanks for sharing that. Festus, for the first question, challenges, you talked about the resistance you got at the bank regarding Black History Month. Would you like to expand a little bit about that?
Yeah, definitely. So I will say this, many years back, when I first relocated from the UK to the US, one of the first people that really kind of embraced us, because of course I came with my wife and my first son at the time, were the people are African Americans, Black Americans. We were, well received and things like that. So I knew that, listen, we're families and what have you. But of course, with every positive things or successful things, you have some trials and tribulations and maybe areas for improvement, of course, right? So, like as I mentioned in my first, opening conversation, in terms of me willing to take risk, help my own people. And when I say helping my own people, I'm talking about Black people in general. Of course, sometimes, as you mentioned, Tai, that you're driven, all of us on this call, we are driven, we are always, hungry to get to the next level and the next level and the next level. And of course, in those situations, you come across maybe some Black people on both ends, Africans, Caribbeans, African Americans, who might want to, size you up, test you a little bit and say, wow, you were not really part of the, how America got to where it was and what have you. And you hear those things, okay, what does your last name mean? And you get those kind of questions, and you give meanings to your names and what have you. And people not necessarily being envious or what have you, but there's some kind of backlash in that, right? So, and you experience that, and you don't take it personally. You have dialogue, you have conversations with people that this is it. And I think one of the reasons behind that is probably, the challenge is due to lack of understanding, lack of cultural awareness on both ends, right? Maybe Africans don't necessarily understand African Americans, in terms of history, what they've been through, to give people like us on this call the way to be able to come to this country and be successful, right? And also maybe due to lack of sensitivity of the cultural issues and what have you, and the history, if you talk about slavery and what have you, and lack of accommodation. So I think one case in point was what I touched about, bringing in that to bring a Black History Month program to a big bank of that assets and revenue was a little challenging in the beginning. And I think it wasn't about me. It's about what can we do to benefit Black people in general, right? So we had some hiccups where, of course, I brought it to my boss at the time, who happened to be a Caucasian, and he was okay with it. And he said, yeah, Festus, on Monday, let's jump on the call and talk to HR. And of course, before that, I was always part of the DE&I, the diversity, equity and inclusion team for the bank and what have you. And I've encouraged a lot of Black people to be part of that, but most people try to push back and say, yeah, that's not for me and what have you. So when people see me doing that, they think I'm doing that for my own personal selfish reason, maybe to be able to get to the next level and to get to that C-suite level. Whereas all I was doing was to be able to have a face and have that seat on the table so I can speak you know, I can support or probably sponsor my own people, which is Black people. So I think when we started talking about the Black History Month program, this is what my vision is looking like. The HR senior person and my boss, they were okay with it. And they said, okay, let's bring some Black people to start the conversation. And I think I will say this, you know, again, areas for improvement, not a criticism by any stretch, was that there were some, you know, Black people that were resistant because I mentioned the fact that, listen, when we are doing this, let's focus on Black history around the world. And I think, as you know, Black people is everywhere. You go to Brazil, apart from Nigeria, Brazil is where you have the most Black people, right? At least about 70 million Blacks in Brazil. So I started talking about little things that we can do just to kick things off. And there was some resistance because I mentioned, like, okay, Martin Luther King, absolutely. I mean, he's one of my role models if he was alive today. But at the same time, Nelson Mandela is on the same playing field, right? So there was some resistance in that situation, but I didn't take it personally because I understand of the fact that, listen, you have to go through the struggle and you have to appreciate the struggles and the history of the native Black Americans. If you don't appreciate it and you don't do the research and really understand the genesis of how things are, then you take things for granted, right? So, but I will summarize it this way, that yes, resistance, a little bit of pushback in the beginning, that who is Festus to come and tell us what to do and things like that. But we work as a team. I talk to these people offline because I was a leader at the bank at the time, right? And then we were amicable and things got done. And now, of course, I left the bank, right? But things are BAU and I still keep in touch with those people. So
that is awesome.
Yeah.
That is awesome, Pastor. So your motive and the scope was what created the initial pushback, but it sounded like over a period of years, you were able to help overcome that barrier. That's amazing. Thank you. Thanks for sharing. Eric.
Yeah, the most interesting challenge that I had, kind of identified with when I arrived in South Africa was around what is considered Black, right? What is considered Black, and when I was having the conversation, it was being explained to me by a mixed South African who, who was born at the time when he was considered privileged, because it was right after apartheid was lifted and the like. And so the way that he was describing it to me, it was class and race kind of mixed up in one defining category that truly impacted your trajectory in life. Okay, and so that challenge was interesting to me because it was connected to what I recognize as the thing that I wanted to solve, right? The challenge that I felt that I could at least have a measurable impact on, and that was, finding a way to, enable those individuals that were being, categorized and not given an opportunity because of that classification, and who have done the work to get 2 and 3 and 4, degrees that are qualified for the opportunity, to actually just try to give them an opportunity. Okay, and so Ty, you talked about, boy, we wish we could do some of that programming that we did around the ESOC over in Nigeria. Well, I believe we can, right? And I hope that we'll have an opportunity to. And one of the things that we're working on now that's leaning in that direction is finding a way to create a risk analyst program, right? That these individuals would be able to participate in and master the art of risk management so that they could be qualified to support some of the risk assessment work, right? That is overflowing everywhere, right? Just based off of compliance and a number of issues like that. So why, now I talk to my friends and my colleagues and they say, Eric, you must be out of your mind. What are you thinking about? And I say very simply, I said, listen, this is a population where you have about 33% unemployment between the age 22 and 35. But that same population has about a 92% bachelor's degree level, right, education. Why not, right? Why would we not go there and tap into that knowledge, tap into that energy, and really be able to put what I like to say, South Africa, in the position of being to risk management what India has become to application development, right? An invaluable knowledge pool of individuals that can speak around governance, risk, and compliance and the like. So, again, I think Dr. Burgess mentioned something to the effect of, you can look at your challenges different ways, right? You can look at you can call it what it's going to be from the beginning and not be surprised when you get there. Well, when I tend to look at challenges, I tend to try to find some way of turning that challenge into a benefit for somebody, even if it's not myself. And that's what this project has become. But it ultimately benefits me in the end because it makes a measurable impact in lives that I never thought that I would ever meet. So that's my my summary on my challenge, if you will.
Wow. Eric, it sounds like you were a fly on the wall when I presented to this group about just a little bit over a year ago. That was kind of the theme of my message. We can turn Nigeria from the pariah in cyberspace, from a pariah to, this is the center of excellence for cybersecurity skill set. I've seen Eastern Europeans do it. I've seen the state of Israel do it. I've seen, apparently the Italians actually did that in New York back in, way back when there was a lot of anti-Italian sentiments. And if you go into law enforcement and government, they pretty much cornered that space in the Northeast, right? That's what I've heard based on history. But they pretty much rebranded themselves to say, okay, we're here to stay and you're going to accept us. And we're actually going to lead some of these areas where we've been disadvantaged, like law enforcement.
Absolutely.
So it's very funny that like last year, I never even saw us. Funnily enough, we actually, when I spoke, it was Black History Month, but it wasn't about Black History Month. It was about talking about Nigeria and how Nigeria can rise up to the challenge and turn that into opportunities, which is pretty much in line with what you're saying. All right, so I think for the sake of time, thanks for sharing that, Ari. That was awesome. I'd like to combine this last two, the second and third question into one. So how has this journey impacted you and your loved ones, your family and your community? And how would you like to see Black people collaborate as one family? I know that sounds very aspirational, but they always say charity begins at home. So you guys are already doing this at home, right? You already bought into this idea of partnerships, between Black folks all over the world, right? With the different stories you've shared, the different journeys you've been through. But how has it positively impacted, your inner caucus? Let me just put it that way, your inner circle. And how do you think Black people need to collaborate going forward? So Dr. Burgess, we can start with you, and then Festus and Eric, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. So if you all in the audience have any questions for our esteemed panelists, please, this will be the time to pose those questions to the chat. All right, Dr. Burgess.
I think the way it has impacted me is I have a strong sense of myself. I am a faithful person, so I know that there is a guide that I follow and supports that. I am the first child of 8, so my sisters and brothers watched what I did, and they said, well, if she can do it, we should be able to do it too. So I have a strong set of sisters and brothers who are very professionals and well educated and are as confident as they can be. And I think part of that is just the fact that we can do something. And, my children watch that. They are also very oriented that way, which means, well, let's just see if we can do it and try it. There was not a sense of, well, we can't, I can't, we shouldn't. It's like, try it and see. If you like it, do it. If not, do something different, keep moving. But I think the goal setting, the additional lifelong learning that I've participated in and continue to do so, is one that says, well, you still, yes, I am. And I have some things I have to do before I'm retired and finished. But I challenge myself to find the things that really mean a lot that I can share with someone else. And that's why I have a long list of mentees as well, because they said, how do you do? I said, I prepare first thing in the morning so that I'm ready when I get there, and nothing is a surprise, and I just roll with whatever situations there are, because, when you give your power to people to make you feel bad, make you not be able to function, make you feel like you're not qualified, that is too much control for me. So I worked hard at doing that, because it's an important component in who you become, how you manage yourself, and how you manage your life, and how you influence others as well. So I'm the very best Norma Burgess I know. That's who I am. So I can't be a wonderful somebody else. I'm Norma Burgess, and I'm a good her. So that's what I focus on, doing my best and doing all that I can to make sure that there's somebody coming along that I might be able to give a piece of advice to. I also take advice pretty well. So I do my best to influence people to do the things that they want to do. So when people come to me and say, well, I'm thinking about it, I said, just do it. What? Do it. So if you don't want to do things, don't mention it to me, because I'm going to follow up with it. When I see students in the hallway, I'll say, well, how are your classes going? Well, I said, you need to see your professors today. What? No, today. Go let them know who you are so that they can help you. And I think it's important to be in a mode of, I came here to get a degree. I'm going to get it. What's it going to take? And I can't quit until I get it, and I'm not leaving without it. So many of our students come to college and they say, well, it's kind of hard. Yeah, it's hard, but just do it anyway.
Awesome. So the theme is just do it.
Just do it.
Just do it.
Yeah, just do it.
Don't spend time talking about it. Don't spend time procrastinating. Just do it.
No.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Festus.
Yes. Just to piggyback on what Dr. Burgess says, yep, you cannot have the mentality that you cannot do things. You need to be driven. You need to get it done. How has this partnership between African Americans or African in Diaspora partnership worked and impacted or shaped how I do things in a positive way? There in life, there are gonna be some, pushbacks and what have you, areas for improvement, but overall you have to keep moving. So the way I've got things done is just making sure I collaborate with people regardless, invite people to my home, get to understand, my culture, and go to their homes, understand their cultures, take my family to different African-American events. I think before COVID hit, at the previous company I used to work for, we were planning of going to the Martin Luther King Museum in Washington, D.C. That did not pan out because, again, for me personally, having visited Nelson Mandela Museum in Soweto, I wanted to also experience, Martin Luther King's what goes on in that museum, what artifacts are. So I think being willing to learn and listen to different cultures has really, impacted me positively. And like I said, I try to, do the best and just making sure that no culture is superior. Try to just listen, take a step back, understand people's culture, understand the history, do research, and you can learn something.
Wow, very well said. So understand, learn, listen. Wow. Wow. All right, thank you. Eric?
Well said, well said. And I'm going to make mine pretty concise. I'm going to borrow something that I learned from one of my colleagues, Devin Bryan, and he said, the private entity feeds my family, the nonprofit feeds my soul. Okay, and that is how this journey has impacted me. Right, it has enabled me to provide a life that I never imagined for myself and my family, but more importantly, it has enabled me to develop as a person and as an individual through the many conversations and the many lessons and the many lives that I've been able to be blessed to connect with. And how do I think that we can work together? I wake up every day and I say, I have to at least identify one person that I can help, right? Doesn't mean I can help them today. Doesn't mean I got to stop helping who I'm helping today, but I got to at least identify one person. And if I identify them and I get to them 360 days from now, then I'm still on my journey, right, Dr. Burgess? I'm still on my journey, right? But I'm telling you right now, I'm waking up and I'm going to help somebody today. I'm going to identify somebody today. And I've been doing that for so long that I got a nice little list. So I'm not going to run out of people. So I'm just going to continue working with families and people as much as I possibly can.
So I can testify to that. Twice since I've known Eric about at least 10 years now. I've gotten a text or call or email from Eric when I've been at my lowest. And when I say lowest, financially, like just not inspired. Like I just feel like, okay, I just might just give up. Of course, I can't show that to my wife, right? Because she's kind of depending on me for us to keep going in this entrepreneurial journey. And twice, Eric has reached out and said, Ty, how's things going? How can I help? And normally I'll be like, oh, no, I'm good. And for whatever reason, I trust him enough to actually tell him, to whine to him. It felt like whining sessions every time we got together. But one thing I found with Eric is he'll listen, but he'll be like, okay, have you thought about doing things like maybe differently? He'll just find a very subtle way of just like getting to the root of the problem. And then he'll say, okay, here's what I can do for you. This, and that. And I'll be like, no one's ever approached me that way. Like not only are they advising me, but they're actually willing to help. And in many cases with Eric, he's actually willing to put his money where his mouth is and his time, which is way more precious than money, right? Because we've only got a limited amount of time. So I've been on the receiving end on that. I know he doesn't like to take credit, publicly for the things he does, but I can definitely testify to that. So I think that the key to this is going back to that Dr. Martin Luther King's statement, one of his most popular statements. What are you doing for others? So I think if we can just really, really start focusing more on that, I think the division, the things that divide us will become, they'll still be there, but they'll become less of a focus. And I think that's really the theme I wanted to get out of this discussion. So at this point, Dr. Oreade, I know we're 8 minutes to the dot of 5 o'clock Eastern. Should we continue with maybe questions from the audience? Maybe we open up the audio, for my esteemed panelists, or what would you like to do? Way longer than I planned.
Yeah, with the kind permission of our panelists, we would like to continue and give our members the opportunity to ask questions. This is a rare opportunity for us, and we don't want to pass it off. So please, if you don't mind, to stay a few more minutes longer. I'm sure a number of our members who want to get your further insights on some touchy areas that they are concerned about. So if you don't mind, a few more minutes. Thank you. So Mr. Lambo, if they don't mind, we would like to.
Are you okay with that? Eric, Dr. Burgess, and Festus, you okay?
No problem.
Yes.
Around for a few more minutes.
Thank you so much.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, okay, you want me to moderate that question part, or you want to go ahead?
Yeah, if you don't mind doing that, I'll just say if
Okay.
anybody wants to speak, they can raise their hands through the, I guess, the Zoom hand raising tool.
Yes, the hand raising
allow
tool.
them to talk. Yeah.
Yeah, but while we wait for that, I would like to make one comment, and maybe a question would round it off. My thing is, I have come to believe over time that we don't have any choice in the world today than to collaborate. And by that, I mean African immigrants in the United States and African Americans. And we have great opportunities if we could just sideline the primordial sentiments that seem to put us apart. And in that collaboration, we should be deliberate, we should be focused, not just on developing individuals, even though we are the units of global development. I strongly believe that if Africa does not develop, the African person, whether African Americans or Blacks anywhere in the world, will be shortchanged. They will continue to see us as less than. Even though at an individual level, so many of us are doing well, but as a collective, there is still this narrative that we are underperformers. And the way the Asians have done it is to go to develop their region. And then that respect comes naturally. So it pains me that we are underperforming in Africa. How can we leverage the collective opportunities and strength that we have in the diaspora to lift Africa out of the current situation it is?
I'll chime in here if you don't mind. And this is, I'm going to regurgitate what was shared to me by a gentleman that I'm working with in Africa, and he basically said, give us the ability to build our own, right? To build our own. Don't set up shop and hire me to run your shop. Enable me to build my own shop, right? And so part of the things that we are focusing on is truly trying to create an entrepreneurial ecosystem, right, on the ground. And that if you create the entrepreneurial ecosystem, you now have the decision makers who can turn around, hire the individuals that need to be employed, right? And so, back to solving challenges. I think before it was, just trying to get folks gainfully employed. You need to get folks gainfully engaged in the economy. And I think you do that by creating more entrepreneurs.
Wow, Eric, so well said. In other words, teach them how to fish, not just give them the immediate fish they need to feed their families.
So teach them how to fish, but take them to the market, right? Take them to the market. The problem is you have a lot of these programs that are getting stood up, and then you got businesses that don't have the relationships, Ty, right? They don't have the relationships to be able to get a contract within that business that is going to enable that business to grow. So when you create the entrepreneur, you also have to create the opportunity. And that is about creating the entrepreneurial ecosystem. So yes.
What you say is so critical, but let me say this real quick. So the first African to go to space is a guy called Max Shuttleworth. Max Shuttleworth had an SSL company that he started out of his garage or basement or whatever. The typical success story in South Africa. White guy, white South African, and within 5 years he sold it to VeriSign. And the guy who actually did the due diligence for that, I know him. He worked for a company called Secure IT here in Atlanta. They were acquired by VeriSign. He's a white South African. He's an ex-Coopers and Librand guy. Very, very top of his game. He actually was sent down to South Africa to do the due diligence. And this was a 5-year-old, if they were even up to 5 years old, startup. This was 1999. He came back to the US. This is his inside story, which is obviously now old news. He said, I came back and I said, write those guys a 10, maybe $20 million check if you feel generous. And they're set for life. They're not gonna say no. And they said, okay, great, thanks. We'll take that on board, because he's the security guy, right? He looked at the technology, looked at everything. A few weeks later, VeriSign announced they were buying them for, I think it was $575 million, because VeriSign SSL was not Y2K compliant, fully Y2K compliant. So they needed to buy Thawte, Thawte, to stay in business.
Yeah.
So he was shocked. So to Eric's point, that guy probably didn't see the opportunity, right? But the people in HQ saw it, because they're like, oh, we need to buy this company. They're really that good. And if they could potentially kill our business, right? Because everybody's going to dump assets and go buy theirs. So they bought them because they needed to survive. So to Eric's point, having that access is very, very important. Left to that South African guy that went back and did the due diligence, they were only worth $20 million, if that. But to the people in HQ, they thought that we need to buy this company if we're going to remain in business, and we're just going to throw as much money to them. The guy who founded the company ended up becoming the first African to go to space.
Awesome.
Yeah, because he was that wealthy. He started Ubuntu Linux after that. Max Shuttleworth, if you look him up. But Eric, your advice is spot on.
Yeah, I see Ololade has his hand up. You want to ask a question? Ololade from Abuja.
Good evening, good afternoon, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ololade. My question would be a follow-up on the last contribution, which was talking about, I'm trying to remember who mentioned, I think it was Mr. Eric that said, instead of coming into Africa and building a business and trying to hire Africans, why not help Africans to sort of build their own, right? But I think that human beings are generally motivated by incentives, naturally. And for companies who are coming into Africa, and we've seen a lot of them, in fact, my company personally has helped some to come into Africa. Most of them are motivated by the incentive for them is profit. And profit because Africa has a lot of challenges, which then means there are a lot of potential, there's a lot of opportunities, right? If we then want to change the narrative to say, hey, instead of you guys setting up your business here, help Africans to build their business, what then would be the incentive for them? How do we incentivize that for them? And the reason why that is important is because if we're not able to sell that incentive to them, I think it's going to be difficult to get them to take that approach or go that route. So that's my question. What would be the incentive for those companies to help Africans build their own businesses, or help them, teach them sort of how to fish in code, like Mr. Lambo said? Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great question. That is a great question, and I absolutely love it. I can think of two reasons off of the top of my head. One, there is an assumption that there's going to be a lower cost model for them investing in a business that is either already in existence, right, or starting it up from scratch. It's going to be a lower cost model than what it's going to cost me to do the same here in the US. There might be more opportunity here, but the operations, the back end operations, is going to cost me more to run, fund, and manage in the US than what it would be just about anywhere else. That's number one. Number two, the ability to leverage a service model, right, that is built off of a lower cost model increases, here's the point, increases the profitability of that company that is supporting you from the outside. The mistake that companies make is that they feel like they have to be present on the ground in order for it to work. It's not true, right? What you need is a trusted partner that you can foster, local on the ground, who intimately knows the lay of the land and everything that needs to happen in order for that business to be successful, for the relationships to be fostered, right? So you need to make an investment in that. And in doing making the right investment, it will accelerate everything else that is connected to that business opportunity, including profitability, right? And so that's a long way of saying, it's the same concept of large corporations thinking that they needed to have everyone working within the office. You don't need that anymore, right? You can invest in someone that's local on the ground and allow them to execute a strategy that you just believe in. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, great answer. And I think I totally buy into that. Yeah, it just makes a lot of sense from a cost perspective. And the main thing where we have to, up our game, particularly in Africa, is in the educational sector. Yes, a large number of Nigerians are educated, but we need to improve on the quality so as to grasp these opportunities that you're talking about. I think Africa is ripe for that. You have alluded to that based off of your experience in South Africa. There are great talents back home. So thank you so much for that response. Yes, Dr. Jumbo.
If I can chime in, I'm sorry, if I can chime in real quick, based on what Dr. Oriade was asking in the beginning, that charity begins at home, right? So for Africa to be great, Black people in the diaspora will have to enhance that, right? So we need to change the narratives. How many Blacks, maybe for the most part, Black Americans, are talked to on a daily basis and say, listen, what's your interest in Africa? And for the most part, because maybe for the most part, they're not aware of what goes on and what we see in the media space, discouraging most Black people in developing Africa. So we need to change the narratives, right? We need to kind of make that collaborative effort, to really not necessarily educate, but to kind of talk about Africa is not a bad place, right? It's the motherland. And it's not dangerous, right? Because how many people do you talk to that probably haven't been to Africa, and immediately you open your mouth and you start talking about Africa, there's some kind of pushbacks and say, listen, I'm not interested in Africa. But then you also have to look at what's going on in Ghana, right? There are a lot of Black African Americans moving to Ghana. And why is that? Because the president of Ghana openly disclosed that, listen, if African Americans come to Ghana, we'll give you a piece of land, right? You almost gonna become a resident or maybe a citizen of Ghana. So going back to what Ololade was asking about the incentives, it's not necessarily financial incentives, but other incentives as well, right? That will kind of open that door and have that gateway to get into Africa. So what the president of Ghana is doing is really, really encouraging. And I see a good move coming down the pipeline that most African leaders will start looking into the same situation.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you so much for adding to that point. I see Dr. Jumbo, you have a question or comment?
Yes, I do. I actually have a question. Thank you for the wonderful presentation so far from all the panelists. It's been quite interesting. I have a follow-up question. I believe it's Eric. Alode asked that question. And when Eric was answering the question, I was like, so something came up. And so I wanted to ask, if you maybe can tell us a little bit how you were able to be, to be successful in getting that accomplished. If you are away or not on the ground, how do you build the trust? Because most times, the trust is where a lot of us are a little hesitant. And we are kind of, sometimes once you're beaten once, you're very skeptical in going back again to try. Maybe you should tell us a little bit how you were able to build trust from both ends.
That is a great question. So any project that I go into, I set risk barriers around it, right? And so I'm always going to assume that I'm going to lose something. And so the things that I trust in, whether it people, infrastructure, or the like, we'll have a certain level of risk tolerance around it. Let me give you a real world example. When I got to Johannesburg, typically I would think that if I was told that I had to travel a certain route for my safety, right? And you can compare me living in New York versus traveling in Johannesburg to give you the difference, right? So if I'm told that I have to travel a certain route for my safety, there is a certain level of risk tolerance that I will place on that to say that I trust even traveling that route, okay? If the individual that told me to take that route becomes untrustworthy, I'm trying to be clear here. If that individual becomes untrustworthy, then no longer, how do I build the trust? I'm trying to do it simple. A lot of times you have to trust that your decision may not be accurate, right? And so all you can do is hope for the best. And in South Africa's example, I asked Ty if he knew someone that was local on the ground, and Ty, you connected me to
Craig Rosawani. He's like the cybersecurity czar for South Africa.
That's right. That's right. So the long way of answering your question, and I apologize for scrambling that early on. The long way is starting with people that I trust, and then trusting and always verifying that what I set out to accomplish is still on course. So if I started out by saying we're going to do a security operations center by August on the ground in Johannesburg, and we have individual checkpoints, leading up to that exercise, I'm always going to check back in that checkpoint until I can no longer trust that that plan is in place. That's the short way. That's the best way that I could describe it. And there's no guarantee that the trust is going to be there. but you got to take the risk. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I guess wherever you are, that investment comes with some level of risk, and you can't eliminate all risk. So you just have to be cautious and calculate your risk, like you said. Great answer.
That's really it.
So, any other questions?
Can I just add to that? So Craig Rosawani is a white guy, white South African, that changed my perception of white South Africans. So when I lived in the UK, one of my team members on the project with Vodafone was a South African guy who I could tell hated me just because I was Black and I was a team lead. He always made a point about how inferior I was technically to him. And I knew where that was coming from, even though I was team lead. So I go to South Africa. Deloitte South Africa is hosting the class. Craig is the director over that school of risk management for Deloitte. So they're hosting the history class. And Craig picks me up from the airport, drives me to, he said, I'm not going to put you up in a hotel. I know you're from the UK, you lived in the UK, you're now in the States. So there's an English guy I know in Sandton who you're going to stay with him. It's safe. It's a very safe neighborhood. He's going to prepare you English breakfast every day because I want you to feel at home. I put my life in his hands for a week. And that's why I could trust him that if Eric talks to him, apart from the fact that he's very well known, he's probably one of the most experienced cybersecurity people on the continent, right? I also felt that he was trustworthy. And then I also found that we shared a common faith, right? So that was a bonding thing. But I told him, I said, Craig, my bias against white South Africans is changed because of you. And he said, Ty, that's exactly what I wanted to achieve. He said, thank you for letting me know.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
The last thing I'll add, Ty, and I know we're going to wrap up. Doctor, the better answer that I would give you is I usually will do things that have more in it for them than it does me, right? So if they break that trust, they're hurting themselves more than they are hurting me.
Great point. Yes, I guess
that's a good one.
At some point, we would just need to take that leap of faith and just start to believe in one another. Yeah, it's a risk, but I think it's a risk worth taking. We should be deliberate about this. Reach out to, for us, Nigerians or African immigrants in the United States, we should reach out to our brothers and sisters, African Americans, and we should encourage them to get to know us as well, because we have this vision of each other that's created mostly from outside of the groups, media and some other groups who don't wish us well, but we can't continue to talk about this, old sentiments and narratives that don't really get us anywhere. We need to be deliberate about coming together. And I think it's doable. African Americans are great people, and so are we. We just have kind of different pathways to where we are today, but we have a common history where, like Bob Marley said, or was it Bob Marley or who else? What other person who said, as long as you're a Black man, you're an African. I strongly believe in that. And once we understand that we have a common destiny, we will start to take ourselves more seriously and be deliberate about coming together. I don't see any more hands up. Any other comments before we round this part of the meeting up?
I agree with you.
Oh, thank you so much, Dr. Burgess. That makes me feel cool coming from you.
Very well said, by the way. I couldn't have done a better summary, Dr. Riade. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Burgess, for taking out time to be with us today. Mr. Eric Permenter, thank you so much. And our own Festus Olayinka, you guys did a great job of this. I know we are all better educated just because of this session. And finally, to our own Tai Lambo for putting this together, great job. Thank you so much. You're always a performer, and we're so proud of you. Thank you very much. And we look forward to having another session like this in the near future. And please, Miss Dr. Burgess, say hi to your daughter. We hope she will come on our show one of these days.
She will, and I will tell her that you all asked about her and talked about her.
Thank you.
I did promise her that. I said, we're going to talk about you a lot. She said, okay.
Awesome.
So
Awesome.
can
Thank you
I just suggest something here that I'm sure most of us on the call would not want to have this to be the last call on this topic, right? So maybe it's time to revisit and do like some kind of refresh in the near future. Is that something that maybe Dr. Burgess and Eric will be open to if we decide to bring you back?
Sure.
Absolutely. And I'm happy to continue the conversation offline as well. Whatever.
Great.
So this is not a point in time experience for me, right?
Right.
Whatever we can do to stay connected and enable one another's mission, please, let's continue to do so. Todd knows, he knows how to get me.
Yep. You have my information, so just let me know.
Absolutely.
Awesome. That's very, very encouraging. Thank you so much. And for our team members, masterminds, thank you so much for making time for this meeting. I'm sorry we couldn't go through our normal agenda. We will pass all necessary information to you on our WhatsApp channel and on our Mighty Networks channel. And so we don't keep our guests and everybody beyond the allotted time. So have a wonderful rest of your weekend and stay safe. Thank you.
Likewise. Thanks for having me.
Thank you all.
Take care.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.